Hi there, welcome back to the Dylan Rounds case. Welcome everyone who's currently here in the live premiere. I appreciate it. Today we're looking back on Dylan's pickup truck data that was recovered and retrieved from a different police department, Bonneville County in Idaho, if I'm correct in saying. Due to the nature of Box Elder, the LE being somewhat incompetent and not helping, as worded by Candice Cooley, others stepped up. And while that's all fine and dandy, the real question is, who remembers? Who ever heard about Dylan's pickup data being retrieved and recovered? Because a certain story was told over time that it was lost. Okay? Upon looking at the comments in recent time, a fair proportion of people were like, never heard that before. I never knew it was recovered. I thought it was lost, long gone, just like me. That's interesting to know, okay? This conversation, this video continues on talking about it, right? Looking back at the comments from the last video I did, answering any questions and looking at key points of views from people, including a Montello local or so, see what people have to say, their raw reaction to hearing about it, because how it was worded by Candice Cooley hasn't been exactly worded like that before exactly, okay? Though, there is a possible clip footage which proves what Candice Cooley said in recent time. It happened way back at the beginning, like some people have stated in the comment section here and there. And we'll get to that. What I do want to do first, okay, acknowledge and shout out to Cleo, okay? Shout out to Cleo for her support on this channel recent time. Very good of her, almost like a one-man army, but she's not a man, but you get the line. A one-witch army with the magical spells and the support. So that's much appreciated. Shout out to Cleo. The order of how I want to do things today will be kind of specific, of how we look back at the original comment, then compare it to what was initially said in the first place, and then move on to the other points of views by people. But even if this is debunked, there is a big but, okay? And I'll briefly explain it to you now. It'll make more sense later. The story Candice Cooley has told initially was, or up to a point when it first started coming about, truck data was lost. The police gave a thumbs up. Candice Cooley, the family, a friend of Dylan, had access to the truck and was able to drive it back home or wherever it needed to go, okay? But in doing so and driving off, the previous 100 miles were lost. That's exactly what Candice Cooley said in some of the interviews. And it's the fact that that concept remained for quite some time and was reiterated over time, even in 2023? Possibly, or late 2022, when Candice Cooley appeared on No Thanks and they did that interview. It was brought up a couple of times. But the order of how things have been said, it kind of contradicts one another in terms of the initial motive the individual had. So Candice Cooley, what's going on? It's a bit of a messy situation. Just want to give you a heads up, okay? It's a bit of a messy situation, this, but we'll try and make sense of the matter, okay? For everybody that is currently here in this live premiere, joining on in, catching up with this video, you haven't missed too much yet, but be sure to watch it all to understand. And for those on catch up, if you are here right now though, feel free to chat, talk, share your thoughts, opinions, discussions in the live chat box, right-hand side of the screen. Let me know if you agree, disagree, if you knew or it's new news to you for the first time on this data being found. If you want to catch up on previous videos, my earlier one today regarding Kenny Veach, top right corner of the screen, you see the I symbol button. You click on that, you'll be redirected to videos to catch up on. If you haven't seen them already, make sure to do so. Down below of this video, feel free to leave some comments, questions, whatever it may be. It will help with the engagement and the discussions in general on this case. It will help spread awareness of this video and the discussions in general. It could generate new ideas for the future, you never know. Down below as well, if you check pinned comment, there is one by me with some additional links if you wish to check them out, and even alternative ways if you wish to support the channel. It's all there at one's hand or fingertips. So, the order of what we'll do first. Let's look at the latest comment by Candice Cooley, what we highlighted recently about the truck data. As you can see on screen, 10th of February, a question was asked in 2024, very recent. Kay says, did the police ever try to retrieve the GPS data from Dylan's truck, the pickup one? Hope he's found and returned to his family. And Candice Cooley responds back last Saturday saying, yes, this was done by Bonneville County Sheriff's Office in Idaho, not Box Elder. That comment by Candice Cooley will be consistent, arguably, to what's said in a minute when I show and share with you a clip of an East Idaho news interview between Nate Eaton, Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds from over a year ago or so. I'll play that to you in a second. But it's interesting because this person that asked the question, did the police ever try to retrieve the GPS data from Dylan's truck? It would imply that Kay isn't aware of what was originally said at the start of this case or in the early days of what we were hearing, right? Because Kay appears to be unknown to most of it, right? Not knowing that the truck data was supposedly lost, as it was stated by Candice Cooley, okay? So Kay is just simply asking a simple question, which is understandable from her point of view, without knowing all the other context behind it. Yet, despite what Candice Cooley has said to everybody else, which has a different impression compared to the likes of Kay, supposedly known that the truck data can't be collected because it's already been lost, Candice Cooley, telling that original story, responds to Kay saying, yeah, it was retrieved, Dylan's pickup data. GPS data. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I've not been corrected yet, but maybe I've not asked the correct questions. So everybody watching right now and lurking in the background, if you can answer my question, it will be appreciated. When they talk about GPS data, if people don't understand my wording because you're from the US, GPS data, okay? Is that the same thing as mileage covered, the last 100 miles, for example? Wherever Dylan's truck went and that covered 100 miles, that this GPS data would reveal the location and the route. Is it the same thing? Yes or no? Or is it a different piece of data? I just want to know. Because if it differed, it could be one thing was lost, but the other was found. But something's telling me this is the same thing. With it being the same thing, why was it told as it was originally lost when it was found? That's what I can't quite get to grips with. Anyway, what I want to play to you right now may tie in with what Candice Cooley has said here last Saturday of February 2024, comparing to what was said over 1 year ago with Candice Cooley and Justin Rounds, interviewed by Nate Eaton. I'll play the clip.
You know, they did take Dylan's campers.
Finally, when the FBI came, the day the FBI arrived, they took the campers.
Yeah. And what about his trucks?
And I reached out to Bonneville County, and they reached into ISP, and they have the truck.
The pickup.
The pickup.
And
hundreds and hundreds, of people all over that place. before anything was ever processed, before anything was ever looked at, letting us take Dylan's pickup home. I still have the text message on my phone from the detective who I asked, can we take his pickup phone? And I was told, you folks do what you need to do, okay. And those are the exact words on my phone. Letting the grain truck go. That was
I didn't even know the grain truck had left.
Yeah, that was the first.
What do you mean letting the grain truck grow? What happened?
They never processed it. They let us take it home.
Bonneville County processed
Yeah.
it. In fact, we used it for harvest, and it's still got all the stickers of the measurements and
Yeah. But nothing was
stuff on
processed
it.
there on the scene. Nothing.
Did an ISP also
ISP
process the truck?
The pickup.
yeah, ISP in Bonneville County
Yeah.
came and did a lot. They did a lot that I don't know that they had to do, but they were. I wish
Willing to
Box
help.
Elder would
Yes.
learn a little bit from them.
Do you know, did anything come back on the truck or the grain truck that you can say?
Not that. I mean,
No.
no, nothing came back. It's not anything that we can't say. Just nothing came back.
Nothing
But
came back.
once again, it was so long before it was processed.
And that maybe they haven't told us.
Yeah.
The pickup's still gone.
So it was interesting looking back at that. I made sure to do it in the correct order. If you wondered what the labels were in the yellow text during those interviews, they were the date of when those interviews were uploaded onto YouTube in the correct order. And it's from way back then, kind of early on in the case, and then growing slowly with time from 22nd of June 2022, still fresh, right? All the way up to around August time, things dragging on, right? And it's trying to understand in between, when did the family know about the truck data of Dylan's pickup truck being recovered and found by Bonneville? Now, one thing that remains very consistent in what we looked at just before then in those interviews way back then, Bonneville did play a huge role and instrumental in helping. Okay. But at any point in those interviews, did Candice Cooley or Justin Rounds ever mention about the truck data being recovered, found, and revealing anything? No. I tried looking at other videos as well, the other East Idaho news videos. I couldn't find any other talk about Dylan's pickup truck. Okay, it is hard to try and look through it all because it's not exactly in a certain order. It's all over the place when you type it in on YouTube. So what it makes me to believe is that when the actual talk about truck data either being found or lost must have occurred in one of the interviews with No Thanks Doug. You remember where Candice Cooley came on just by herself and was talking to Doug on YouTube and mentioned about how truck data was lost because they were allowed to drive the truck home without the police saying you can't. The police said, yeah, you do what you need to do. And that's what the family did. Unknown to them, whilst driving the truck, Dylan's pickup, they lost 100 miles of where it was previously recorded. That's what was mentioned in the past. So, if anyone's confused, let's just briefly reflect on what was said in those two news interviews and then what was said at a later point. So, very early on, Dylan's pickup truck, Dylan's grain truck, eventually being taken in by Bonneville. The LE weren't exactly helpful there in particular. But the trucks that were taken in by Bonneville and ISP, if that's the correct pronunciation, or abbreviation I should say, that what was really found from those vehicles, anything of use? And Candice Cooley kind of nodded her head saying, no. Probably more so about the grain truck. But as you saw, Justin Rounds did hint and highlight that, well, Bonneville still have the pickup truck, and there's that chance that there could be something found, right? We don't know yet. So at the time of when that was mentioned, okay, fair enough, possibilities that there are still things to find and retrieve. But from then onwards till when? Of February, of January before the 10th or so, before Candice Cooley responded on that Facebook post, I've kind of been left in the dark, right? Because the only thing that was mentioned between the 23rd of August 2022 up to the 10th of February 2024, in between that was mentioned was in 2023 on No Thanks interview with Candice Cooley, where Candice Cooley said that because in relation to when the police back then gave the thumbs up to say, you do what you need to do, move the vehicles, drive on, as what we saw in that first interview documented, or the second interview documented just before, but they were able to move the truck, Dylan's pickup, unaware of the data being lost. And they eventually found out it was lost, but they didn't know. And the police just let them get away, drive off, reverting back to what Candice Cooley was getting at in the first or second interview, what we saw before, where a lot of stuff may have not been processed or fully processed, things missed out on, missed opportunities, missed evidence. It kind of ties in with one another, right? But then the unknown, the uncertainty of was anything recovered or not. That Bonneville at the time, way back then in 2022, in possession of Dylan's pickup truck, who knows what the data could bring or the results that could follow once we get the results back, right? I don't know, because there's a massive blank period, you know, like how I said. Because from my point of view, and this is just me, okay, it might be different for other people, 23rd of August 2022, Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds mentions that we don't know about the pickup truck, the data, the GPS, we don't know about it. The next thing I hear, a year or two on, 10th of February 2024, like there's been data found by Bonneville. Okay, it correlates. The group, the police department, the county in Idaho, that were responsible for finding this GPS data of Dylan's truck is the same police department that were involved way back then, 23rd of August, and before that, 22nd of June 2022. So it's by the same police department who were responsible for supposedly finding this truck data. Okay, so it's consistent there. So it was handed over to the right people, Bonneville, back in 2022. And then it was mentioned in 2024 that Bonneville were responsible for finding the data of Dylan's pickup truck. Okay, but do you see the massive gap from 2022 to 2024? It's taken over 2 years for me to know about it being found. And from in between 2022 to 2024, not once was it mentioned, at least to my memory, of it being recovered. All that was mentioned back in 2022 of August 23rd was, we don't know because they still have the vehicle. The next thing that was mentioned, though, in 2023 was on Doug's channel about how initially the data was lost because the LE, Box Elder, said you can drive the trucks on. That's what they did with the pickup and found out, oh, we've lost 100 miles. Now we've got to estimate it, right? Improvise. That's the whole reason to why I did that map analysis in, I guess, was it 2023 or late 2022? It was around then, right? That map analysis of trying to work out the vehicle data, the estimation made by Candice Cooley, retracing the tracks of where the vehicle could have gone to because they didn't have the real data to back it up for clarity, right? Does that make sense to people? What I'm trying to do is like a rough timeline of when things were taken in, such as by Bonneville ISP, and when was the data recovered and retrieved, okay? It's kind of like with the phone, okay, an alternative piece of evidence. The phone found June 18th or June 19th, around there at Lucin Pond. The family, hearing that news and cloning Dylan's phone onto another device to look for any details, messages, clues, hints, evidence, they found nothing. Blank. Nothing odd, nothing strange. Seems like a dead end, right? And then November 14th, 2022, police hear about from the forensic search on the phone that file retrieved of a time-lapse video on Dylan's phone, 7:27 a.m. timestamp tying in on the day of Dylan's death. Right, within a 30-minute time difference between Dylan's last phone ping and after what was done to Dylan. Okay? Did Candice Cooley, Justin Browns know about it back then? No. But they were informed much later on, a year later or so. So there are big delays in between, right? But just initially, with the understanding of, they were in the presence of a piece of evidence, Dylan's phone, the family. Nothing was found on it. And yet the forensic team was able to recover a key file. How did they recover it? I don't know. But if you knew that there was a file originally, but you couldn't find it on the phone in a casual way, they needed specialist, you know, from a family's point of view, you could be like, damn, we've lost key evidence, we've lost it, it's gone for good. And a specialist comes on in and retrieves it out of nowhere, pulls it out of thin air. Not literally though. I'm using that example. Could that be the equivalent of the pickup truck data initially being lost and presumed unretrievable, and then later being retrieved and found somehow by Bonneville? Surely that would tie in line, right? Because there's people in recent time commenting, just simple comments about how, you know what, maybe this truck data was found way back then and it led to nothing. There was no leads. It didn't lead to finding Dylan. They searched in the direction the truck may have gone in, but they found nothing. And that's why it's not been talked about since. Why couldn't it have been debunked? Why couldn't it have been mentioned at some point? Why did it take me 2 years to hear about it when other evidence and updates have been given with time? And it's not just me, right? There's other viewers as well. Why did it take other viewers as well to hear it directly from Candice Cooley? Why did it take 2 years to know that the truck data was found? But when was it found? You would think in 2022, right? If Bonneville are already in possession of Dylan's pickup truck at the time, like that interview said back then. But what was the time frame? From 23rd of August 2022 up to what point? The end of the year? Early 2023? When did the family hear back from Bonneville that the truck data was found and retrieved? That's never been mentioned publicly. So with it only being mentioned now by Candice Cooley in recent time, I'm confused as to when it was initially found. So I tried looking through those interviews, what I showed to you earlier on, to see if I can make sense of what they mentioned and what they said, and does it follow a particular order? Because in that big gap of 2 years, all I heard was with time that the truck data was lost. So if you look at it in this way, early days, LE, Box Elder, you can drive Dylan's pickup truck home. That's what the family or friends of Dylan do. They lose that 100 miles because it resets, or it then starts recording the next 100 miles and the past 100 miles is lost. They don't know about that supposedly at the time, but they do say that Bonneville have got in possession of Dylan's pickup truck to analyse and recover things. The family aren't sure as to will anything be found. From the grain truck perspective, nothing was found, but from the pickup, who knows? The next thing that was then mentioned much later on was reflecting back by Candice Cooley that because we were allowed to take the pickup truck home, it led to data being lost. And by then, Candice Cooley would have already known that it previously was in possession by Bonneville, right? County. And yet there was no attempt made at that point. At that point, upon talking about data being lost, nothing about Bonneville trying or making an attempt or saying that they couldn't find anything themselves. So it goes from hope to lost hope to possible hope of Bonneville finding something to later no hope, reflecting back by Candice Cooley on Doug No Thanks, saying, because of the LE, we lost 100 miles of Dylan's truck data. That could have been crucial. So then from 2023 at some point, all the way up to February 10th, 2024, where Candice Cooley just casually answers a question and says, yes, Bonneville were very helpful and they did retrieve the GPS. What? So you've got data, you lose the data that's lost is reinforced and explained as to why, and then later the data has been found. Do you see the order? Lost, found, lost, found. Basically, short story is back, forth in information, right? It's not clear. It really isn't. That's why I was originally, on the previous video, hinting that is there a possibility that what we saw on the 10th of February 2024 by Candice Cooley, her response last Saturday or so, was it recent? That after those years of no hope, those years of lost evidence, finally something has been recovered which was initially lost, right? The same order as in when Dylan Round's phone was found June 18th, 19th, nothing was found on it, nothing strange. But fast forward onwards and the forensic specialist dive on the phone, they did find stuff, but it took time. Does that apply to Dylan's pickup truck? I wonder. But I've not heard Justin Rounds make any references or updates since, only Candice Cooley. So what I'm just going to do now, we're going to look back at the comments in recent time. We can also acknowledge one of the Montello locals to see what they think of the overall situation with this truck data. Here we are, adjusting it to the newest. Let's start from the bottom, work our way up. A few comments by me, hopefully people understood the video, and it seemed like they did. It wasn't just the last video that I did, which was talking about truck data. It was also highlighting the BS from all the wannabe experts and experts out there that speak on behalf of a family member in the Dylan Rounds case or a friend that once knew Dylan in some way or another. And it's always third-party representatives doing the talking, not the original source. Why can't the original person step up and reinforce that consistency? It's never happened yet, nor has the family ever corrected or updated previous points made by these third-party people. That was the general grip of things, and people seemed to listen, which was good to see. And it got awareness, right? And it seemed to, regenerate new life in the Dylan Rounds case all of a sudden. So that really surprised me. So we got Glenn, Cleo, shout out Cleo. We got Tolerance, shout out to Tolerance. Got American Honey, thoughts about it, not available, no response. We got Gage saying, first time I've heard of the data from the truck. Good info. So I appreciate that. 4 people agreeing as well with Gage. So Gage Chan, who's been around the Dylan Rounds case, who's followed it himself and followed other channels out there. This guy saying he's never heard of truck data being found before. This is the first time hearing about it, right? That's pretty critical and important, right? It just shows it's not just me that thinks or feels this way. And as I said, from what we looked at the archived footage and stuff from back then and reflecting back on it, there's a bit of a jump from one to the other. Now, if you wonder why I didn't show a clip of Doug No Thanks when it comes to the interviews of Candice Cooley, it's because they're not there. No Thanks, Doug has returned back to YouTube most recently, but his old channel has been terminated, and so have all the videos. So we can't access them. That's why I can't present them to you as evidence, which is very unfortunate, but it is what it is. Beatrice, thank you for the update. You're welcome. Classy, a lot for an old lady to digest. I have to watch it again. Feel free to let me know your thoughts. We've got Andrew Colver saying, Warlight Ref, I feel that we haven't heard about the data because they followed the truck's data and there wasn't a body to be found. See, that's understandable. But there's been other moments, right, where there's been evidence or an event or talk about something which they checked, a location which was super secretive at a time, didn't mention anything about it. Fast forward onwards, then they talk about it and refer back to, oh yeah, we dug up the main line. Oh yeah, we dug it up a second time round. We didn't find anything, but it was still talked about publicly. You get what I'm saying? It's kind of like with, what would be another one? Maybe the tracks. I think that might have been one where at first possibilities like Dylan truck, could it have been used? Is that why there's mud under the wheel, the arch, and finding track marks in a wash nearby? Does it link? We're going to try and get a cast. We're going to try and get a mold or something. We're going to get someone from a certain location to run, was it a license plate check or a tyre check to compare and contrast to see if it is Dylan's and it matches the track marks. And then later Candice Cooley did an update saying it didn't happen because it was too late, and because of winter time it ruined the tracks, so we couldn't follow it up. Do you get what I'm saying, Andrew? Where there was opportunity to do something, there was evidence to retrieve and to cover, to compare to Dylan's truck, but because it wasn't done in time, it was lost, it was wasted. Just like how supposedly Candice Cooley saying how when it came to like some kind of DNA retrieval at times that no forensics were done in locations such as the Grangeshed property, which that in itself is a bit of a contradiction to what was said previously by the likes of the Shack Lady and supposedly Candice Howard, speaking on behalf of Candice Cooley, saying that biological matter was found in a Grangeshed property, such as in the hole. But Candice Cooley saying in 2023, towards the end, that nothing was found and it was done too late, and that if dogs did pick up on anything, it was too late. The forensics, the DNA that was once there, was destroyed over time naturally. So whilst yes, some contradictions here and there, and whilst yes, there might be some people speaking on behalf of another person and they're talking a load of shit, there have been times and moments where there's been opportunity and it was later updated that nothing was found, but it was still talked about publicly. So with having that, or with taking that in mind, why couldn't the same have been done with Dylan's pickup truck? Considering there's been previous stuff mentioned about Dylan's truck and updates given, then why can't we have the full picture too? Response-wise, what did I say? Main question is, when was the data found? Andrew says, that was my first question. You'd think it was earlier on before too much time passed. What was the year and exact model of Dylan's truck? Let me pull some strings. So, Andrew Culver, like how you were saying about the question of when. Did it happen early on? Well, let me know, Andrew, from what we looked at just before of those early news interviews, from the looks of it, Candice Cooley, just in rounds, at least up to the 23rd of August 2022, they were completely left in the dark and unaware of truck data being found, right? So from the beginning, the 30th of May 2022 up to the 23rd of August 2022, there was no knowledge that truck data of Dylan's pickup truck was found. It hadn't happened in that space of time. So we're looking past the 23rd of August 2022 as to when something may have been found, as to when the family was supposedly informed that the truck data was found, right? But it was never mentioned publicly, so it's a guessing game. That's why we're looking at these news articles, interviews, to try and pick out what was said at what point and then what was eventually said at a later point and fill in the gaps along the way to try and, I don't know, whittle it down to what year, what month, was the information collected? I hope this video is somewhat clear to understand. Christy says, the fact of Dylan making a phone call or text his grandma is very important. Literally everybody could send a text without grandma noticing it, but only Dylan could have made a phone call. So if it was a text, was it really Dylan? And was he at the gate the last time we heard from him, or was it only his phone pinging at the gate but carried by someone else? What was my response? It appears a phone call was made. There appears to be consistency in that because every single family member has said a phone call occurred. Now, I understand what Christy is referring to about, well, Dylan was the one to initiate the supposed call, so Dylan would know what he did as for the means of communication. But to be honest, the receiver, the person on the receiving end of the phone, right? A text message, yeah, you might see it too late. But if it's a phone conversation, likely it's at the very time of when the call was made, whether it be because you're notified by your own phone pinging or ringing, or just down to the simple fact that the way the phone ping, the timestamps lay, and how the phone call went underway, and then supposedly Dylan went onwards after that phone call finished, it just seems to tie in line with one another. And the recall from Karen Rounds, the grandmother of Dylan Rounds, well, Karen would know. So if you really wanted to whittle it down, only Dylan Rounds and Karen Rounds would know as to how one another communicated with each other, as it was a one-on-one form of communication at that time stamp on the day, around 6:51 a.m, 28th of May 2022, right? Dylan making a call to the grandmother answering the call and responding back and listening into what Dylan said he was going to do. Hence why the grandmother was able to recall as to what Dylan's aims were on the day, because Dylan contacted her about it and what he was going to do. And Karen would know and identify that it was a phone call, because there is a big difference between a phone call and a text message. Normally, a phone call will be vocal communication. A text message is just written, typed. Yes, you can send voice messages, that's in between, but Karen Rounds outright said a phone call. Dylan called me. And all the other family members have said the same thing. I can understand other family members not truly knowing because they weren't there when Dylan made the call, and they weren't there to receive the call by Dylan at the time. So whittling it down, it's only Karen Rounds that would truly know. Okay? So, does that make sense? And it's Karen, Larry and Karen. I don't know why, but is it because I've heard the word Karen a few times, like when describing other people in the case, using that line, oh, a Karen. Apologies about that. Sometimes when you hear so many names or words, it can overload your brain, and I know you might get a bit confused, but Dylan's grandmother, right, received a call from Dylan. So the grandmother would be the only one besides Dylan to know how that communication went down. Okay? What did June say? Did Dylan call her every morning, or was it just a coincidence that morning? Was it ever said why he called her, something specific, or just to say hi? Well, June, basically from what Karen said, the grandmother, and what the family have said in general, but specifically from what the grandmother said in the Dylan Rounds documentary, which I did watch, Karen said that Dylan made a call to her near the Grange Shed gate from the phone pings when looking back at it after. And the initial call was made simply informing the grandmother of what Dylan was going to do. Park the grain truck in the grain shed and then go on after. And from what the family or the parents said of Dylan, presumed that Dylan was then going to go on and meet up with family, grandparents or Dylan's own parents, one or the other. Okay? And it was said that that's what Dylan would do in the past. It's like triangular, where Dylan would either be at his farm or doing custom farm work or visiting friends or family, right? That's what he did. That's what his pattern was. As for calling the grandmother every morning, that wasn't mentioned, June, but what the family did say, and specifically Candice Cooley and a bit Justin Rounds, mentioned how Dylan would call different people, different family members at different times, whether it be about what he's doing, getting up to, farm work related, or an event that may have happened. Even if it's little, it was big to Dylan, such as rainfall, flooding, planting seeds, getting on with stuff, right? Dylan being passionate, and the family and different family members listening in when Dylan made a call at any point or time. That's why, June, the whole thing as to why it was initiated that Candice Cooley, Justin Rounds decided to head down on the 30th of May 2022 was initially by unanimous decision in which the whole family of Dylan Rounds agreed that no one else has received a call from Dylan since the 28th of May. And because of that radio silence and, I guess, a regular form of contact what Dylan would have with different family members, even if it was just one followed by the other family member spread out, if there was always at least a family member that heard from Dylan Rounds, then it would be presumed okay. But on this occasion, it was radio silent, and when all family members agreed that Dylan hadn't called anyone else since the grandmother, it was presumed something must be wrong, Dylan must be hurt, and that's when they agreed to go on down, more so the parents, immediately, okay? That's how it's been talked about within the case, okay? As for the people, other people out there that say Dylan texted the grandmother, how do, whether it be locals from the area or people online, how do people know that Dylan Rounds specifically texted the grandmother? It just seems a bit rude, in a sense, because surely the grandmother would be the only other person to know because they're the receiver. The grandmother receiving either a call or a text, the grandmother would have made it clear as to what she received, and she did. She said she received a call. So really, that should be the end of the discussions, right? Because they're the only two people to know, Dylan and the grandmother, in which the grandmother then passed it on to the family as to what happened and the last form of contact. Hence why, after that and the radio silence, it was presumed something was wrong, right? Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know why other people out there, outsiders, try and change the narrative that it's a text message and not a call. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a form of communication. Is it a major difference between a phone call or a text message? Well, the whole imposter thing you could, highlight. But from what Karen said, could hear Dylan's voice because it was through a call. And Karen didn't mention anything about hearing a distinct voice different to Dylan. So it just seems natural that it was Dylan, okay? And I know we can all say, well, we weren't there to know, so we can be skeptical as to whether it was a phone call or a text. So, we hold back there. Yeah, but if someone who was present, who was on the receiving end of Dylan's communication, and they say this is what happened, surely that would be the truth. And I know third-party people can come on in and say it was a text message. What I want to know is, why do the general public believe in random third-party people that say Dylan text messaged the grandmother, and yet when the grandmother, the actual receiver on the other end of the phone, being contacted by Dylan, who says it was a phone call, not as many people believe the grandmother? So more people believe some random individual out there claiming it was a text message over the actual grandmother that received the communication from Dylan. That is ridiculous. I know people have been suspicious of Candice Cooley because of the contradictions and the inaccuracy. And, there's been a witch hunt against Candice Cooley, right? There's not been a witch hunt against Justin Rounds, has there? There's not been a witch hunt against Karen Rounds, the grandmother. So why aren't people listening to the grandmother then? Why has the narrative been twisted with time? It sounds like a form of disruption, in my opinion. Anyway, moving on. We got this returning viewer. I can't remember the person's name because it's the tag handle. We got Brian. Shout out to Brian. Cough is still there. Brian says, I think what she is saying is that the GPS info was recovered. When it was recovered, it was realised that the system only tracks the vehicle for a certain number of miles. I don't believe any missing data was recovered. Right. So, on the spot, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian. What you're suggesting, Brian, is that initially in the early days when the LE gave the thumbs up for the family or friends of Dylan to take that pickup truck of Dylan's back home, the original data was lost. The new data that was recovered by Bonneville at a later point turned out to be the data of when the family were in possession of the vehicle, rendering that data being found as useless. You know what, Brian? If that's what you're getting at, that's a very good point, and we'll acknowledge it once again at the end of this video. Hopefully, I understood what you said. We got Sonjaj saying, great point, something is odd in Denver. Why are we talking about Denver? Or are you saying, that's a great point, I'm from Denver? I don't know. Classy, oh, there we go. Very good points. Not one really knows what happened unless they were there. With that in mind, I basically listen to everyone, but don't take just anything and everything as fact. In the long run, we will not know the truth until the case is legally solved. That's a fair balance, fair understanding. Yeah, I get that. We got Salty Pancakes here saying, hey, that's a great thumbnail, picture of the grain shed. Where did you get it? Oh, that's right, the real content creator, Salty Pancakes. Right, so I think there's a level of cringe. Okay, feel free to facepalm. We'll get back to that shortly. And we got June. Would the information from the Bonneville Sheriff's Office be public knowledge and then able to get copies of it? I've never heard about this before. Okay. I guess you never know. Very good points. Anything else? No, I think we've covered everything there. Brian, we'll get back to you shortly. Let's just respond back to Salty Pancakes for a brief second. So it appears that Salty Pancakes once again is making a big deal out of nothing because, as said and previously documented and archived, credit has been given to Pancakes in the past as to where certain material or screenshots came from. Okay? Simple as that. It's been said multiple times. Pancakes needs to understand that. Just like how Jim Terry needed to understand the fact that I did give credit to him with the previous research on Brookie being a fake individual in the past when it came to the Dylan Rounds case. People get ahead of themselves too soon without understanding or realising that credit has been given in the past or at some point or another. What Salty Pancakes should be very grateful of is the fact that Warlight Raff carried that torch in the Dylan Rounds case, keeping the case alive and even referencing material from Pancakes, right? Because just remember, Salty Pancakes, when you got in trouble or when trouble came to you and your channel was originally terminated, a lot of videos were lost. Whether you still have access to them now or not, initially on YouTube, they were lost, long gone. How could people refer back to them? They couldn't at the time. And whilst you moved on yourself elsewhere, who was there to fill in the missing void? Me. And with me previously archiving some of the footage and screenshots by you, in which there was an agreement, as you should remember, everything was fine. So, in your absence, I kept the case alive and kept your material relevant and active. So be grateful for that, Pancakes, because, you know, you've got the analysis perspective and then you've got the original footage. Both complement one another. Right, it's as simple as that. As for people in general, wondering if this is Salty Pancakes or not, leaving that comment, it is. Salty Pancakes has returned back to YouTube recently and is uploading videos once again, and I believe re-uploading videos from the Dylan Rounds case and interviews with Kurt Wadsworth also. So anyone present right now, Salty Pancakes is back. The Shack Lady has returned. Jim Terry Mr. X, a kind of back on YouTube. No thanks, Doug Hutton is back on YouTube. Do you notice a pattern? It's like some big dysfunctional family reunion. Everybody all coming back together? Not exactly. But they're all back on YouTube, or most are in some way or another. Does that mean trouble will be brewing in the future? Who knows? You could honestly argue, not so much the Dylan Rounds case, but the overall community, true crime, YouTube streets, whatever cringy line you want to use. In general, I would argue and say that things have gone back to square one, right? People have been divided and split up with time and then reformed, etc., over and over again. But now you got all the people in play and returning back. There might be the odd few key characters and people still missing, but you know, if you think as to what was a complete mess back then, it could happen again with all these returning people. Okay? So, with that being said and briefly acknowledged, what we need to do, last thing, is acknowledge the comment from Montello Local, such as Weezer. On a different post, Weezer did respond. Let's just see what she's got to say there about the truck data. Well, here we are. This was posted 14 hours ago. If it is a bit difficult to read the text, if it's too small, don't worry. I'll read it out and feel free to listen in. So in response to my question about the truck data being found, Weezer said, I think it's totally possible that they were able to get the data. On the other hand, I don't think that anything useful was found. If the truck was driven that day, such as Dylan's death, there has been plenty of time to search the areas that it may have been in. There has been almost no snow this winter, so the weather isn't stopping any searches. Wow, that's interesting, that. I personally not heard much about the weather out there. Last year, though, it was bad, wasn't it? And most people had to stop, and some were stranded out there because it was that rough. Anyway, Weezer says, something else that I just thought about is his phone, Dylan's phone. Besides the pings, they should have been able to pull the location history. For example, on my phone, when I look at my location history, it pulls up the information on where I was, what time, how long, and even puts it on a map. They should know all of Dylan's movements that day and previous days. That data stays unless you delete it. I can look back on my history to the time I got my phone because I've never went into my settings and deleted the information. So in my opinion, I think they have had the truck data for some time already. Okay. Weezer, what you're saying could indirectly tie in with what Brian may be saying as well, and my interpretation of it. Let's all stitch it together in a second. Now, in reference to what Weezer said about phone history, exact location or timing and time spent, maybe that's why the family were able to give phone pings in such specific areas. So when the third-party expert said it's only a radius and no one can be specific about actual phone pings, well, what if, besides the phone pings, like what Weezer says about phone history and location, that's what complemented and tied in line with the time stamps and the exact location to where Dylan may have been in possession of the phone at a specific time up to a certain point. That would make sense. So it's interesting for Weezer to share that point. Now, let's stitch it all back together with the whole truck data. So from working it out, it appears that after the 23rd of August 2022, past that point, at some point, the family would have been informed about the supposed data being found by Bonneville of Dylan's pickup truck. The question as to when specifically is unknown. The question as to whether the data was useful or not could remain unknown in a way. But there were some fair points mentioned by people commenting saying if that data was found, more so in the past, then searches would have been conducted and it would have been wrapped up there and then if anything important was found. If the genuine idea was that the pickup truck was used in disposing Dylan, and if data was found which traced back to those locations at the time, so family that later found out about it initiated searches in those directions, where the truck was taken, where Dylan was taken, surely you would think by now, something would have been found. Dylan would have been found. And because he wasn't, that's probably why it's not been talked about publicly. But my counterpoint to that partially is there's been other times and other opportunities where things could have been found or retrieved, but it was done too late. But it was still highlighted by the family or Candice Cooley in interviews in the future. It was cleared up. A dead end or a new lead, it was cleared up, right? So why couldn't the same have happened here with it being such a crucial part of evidence? That's what makes me think it might tie in line with a different outlook, partially highlighted by Weezer, but maybe more so Brian in that. And I mentioned it before, but I'll try and reiterate it again. That initially, the original, the true truck data from Dylan's pickup truck, specifically to do with the 28th of May 2022 or the 29th of May 2022, around that period, fresh at the time of when Dylan was murdered and disposed of. If Dylan's pickup truck was used around that point, those 100 miles of when it was last used could have been crucial in pinpointing as to where and what happened and recovering Dylan. But past that, onwards, LE saying you can take the vehicle home, and that's what they did. And in doing so, those 100 miles that were last recorded, last used, maybe in the disposing of Dylan, let's just say, were lost. And Candice Cooley highlighted that at a later point and repeated it with time, partially blaming the LE for allowing them to just simply take the vehicle away without any restrictions, without LE taking the vehicle in for testing and checking for the original GPS data, neglecting it. So the realization by Candice Cooley of it being lost could be linked back to when Bonneville, in between, beforehand, let them know that data was found. So like what we saw in that news interview, June 22nd, 2022 and onwards, Justin Round's able to reach out to Bonneville and Bonneville cooperating and getting a hold of the trucks, grain truck, and holding the pickup truck back. So like delays in between. Grain truck, nothing found. Pickup truck at the time still being withheld and maybe trying to find stuff on it. Bonneville do find data, GPS data on Dylan's truck. Family get excited at the time, let's just say. But the data that they're informed about is the GPS data and locations as to where the family or friends initiated going. Does that make sense? The last known data that was retrieved by Bonneville is basically the data in which the family or friends were in possession of that vehicle when the LE said, oh, all right, you're good to go ahead and drive it back home. So in the end, yes, technically GPS data was retrieved from Dylan's truck, but it wasn't the original data from when Dylan was using the truck or the murderer. So it kind of renders it pointless. So if a simple question is asked at any point in time, did police get a hold of Dylan's truck data, the GPS on it? The simple question in response to that would be yes, and Bonneville being responsible. But as we clearly outlined, just because data was found doesn't mean to say it was the data relevant to the day of Dylan's death. More so, the possibility that it's more relevant to the time where the police after said you can drive it home, and that's when the original data was lost and was overlapped by this new data and the locations. And maybe that's why the family never really brought it up. But what they could have done is expanded upon what was previously said. So if Candice Cooley, in 2023, speaking to Doug, no thanks on YouTube in a live stream, said that the original data was lost, the 100 miles. So it's a lost cause. By then, Candice Cooley likely would have been informed by Bonneville that the GPS data was found of Dylan's pickup truck, but it wasn't relevant to the original true GPS data. It was more so in linkage to the family's whereabouts when operating that truck, when taking it home. Why did Candice Cooley not add on to that point, saying, you know what, can I just jump on in right now, right? The best solution would have been if in recent time, 10th of February, what was that drifting down by me? I don't know what that was. If on the 10th of February, when that person asked a question on the Facebook page, asking Candice Cooley, has the truck data been found, yes or no? The best response by Candice Cooley would have been, yes, Bonneville were able to retrieve the GPS truck data of Dylan's pickup truck. Unfortunately, it's the data retrieved that was when we were in possession of it, making it pointless, meaning it had no link or relevancy to the time when it was previously used on the day of Dylan's death or the desecration of Dylan. So it was a waste of time. It was a dead end, a dead lead. It went nowhere. It didn't need to be followed up or investigated. But what we can acknowledge is that the LE didn't, take into consideration the vehicle needing to be checked from the beginning. So there was still wasted evidence at the end of the day. Now, that's just my interpretation, okay? Because depending who you are and where you've been, if you just saw that response by Candice Cooley in recent time, responding back to that question saying, yes, Dylan's pickup GPS data was found. It's very vague, isn't it? Right? It's not exactly saying when it was found. It's not exactly saying if it led to new leads. It's not exactly being clear as to what that GPS data showed for itself, as for the locations, as for the date, the time, the timestamp. None of that. So yes, data can be found, but doesn't mean to say it's relevant to the case or the day of Dylan's death. It could be later, which makes it irrelevant and not exactly useful. So that's probably the best way of looking at it, to be fair. It still doesn't clearly explain or outline as to when exactly the family knew or when Bonneville found the actual data. We can say early on, but how early on or how late? It's only been mentioned now. Why was it not mentioned back then? Let me just mention one more thing, okay? Maybe it's only come out now because a person decided to ask that question, and that's why Candice Cooley replied. Maybe if that question was asked a year ago or two, we would have got a response and answer quicker. Fair? But take this in mind. Back in 2023, and around the time Candice Cooley started initiating interviews and joining No Thanks Doug's panel, doing those interviews, there was a live chat, and at times there was a Q&A and a time for answering questions from the live chat or people sending emails out for then Candice Cooley to respond back to in the interview with Doug. And a few times it did crop up about Dylan's pickup truck, and that's where the references were made, where Candice Cooley kept talking about the fact that data was lost. But at that point, if there was the opportunity to say, hey, but Bonneville did find data, it just wasn't relevant to the day of Dylan's death, why couldn't that have been mentioned back then, right? People did, in a way, ask questions about the truck back then, but we didn't get the same answer as what we see now. So, you read it for the first time now and you think it's new. It's only just happened, right? That's from my point of view. Because I've not heard it mentioned before, I'd be under the assumption that it's only happened recently. If it did happen in the past, it should have been cleared up or explained, right? So you could say this is a contradiction from Candice Cooley, how it seemed to be the approach of data could be retrieved, data lost, or pending, then finding out it's lost, then later reinforcing why it's been lost, and only now it's been found. Even shorter, in summary, in the beginning of the case, the hope that data could be retrieved from his truck to tie in line with the idea that it was used. Later knowing that there wasn't anything found because it was lost. by the hands of them themselves, unknown to them at the time when driving the truck back home. To then later, recently, saying it has been found. How do you go from saying it's completely lost back then at the time to just now saying it's been found? 2022 to 2023, all that was ever said was Dylan's truck data was lost. 2024, Dylan's truck data was retrieved by Bonneville, the GPS. Do you know when you narrow it down, right, that much, from 2022 to 2023, no data found, lost, to then hearing in 2024 that it's been found, well, it's taken 2 years to find it. That's where the confusion is. And it's lacking clarity. That's why we're trying to think of ideas and theories as to what could have actually happened, right? At the end of the day, whether the truck data led onto something or was a dead end, it would have just been nice to know. As for the timeline, as when evidence, key evidence or potential evidence was retrieved and found at a point, so it fits in line on the timeline, it would just be nice to know. Because it seems so abrupt from 2 years ago, data lost, to now, data has been found. But some people are claiming that data was found back then. If it was found back then, it should have been addressed back then, but it's not. It's only been mentioned now. I don't know. I don't think there's any more ways I can say it, right? So, is there anything else to highlight, address, or acknowledge there? No, I think we've been through it enough now. Just let me know your thoughts down below, okay? Do you agree with Brian's comment? And Brian Reeves, if you're here, let me know if I was on the same wavelength as you when I tried interpreting your comment, or if I was completely off track with what you were saying. You know, is it a valid point by me or not? Okay. And yeah, last but not least, as we said, with all these returning characters and faces once again from all out there on the YouTube streets, who knows what could happen in the future? Maybe people will gather together once again when the whole trial or court case of Dylan Rounds-Brenner goes underway. Oh God, that could get a little bit messy, right? As for drama in general, I've been away from it. I don't know what's going on in the background. Some people might be getting burnt, people getting hurt. You know, who knows? Things might be getting worse. I don't know, because I've been focusing on these cases. Though what I do know is, whilst I might not be involved in trouble in the Dylan Rounds case, as for the Kenny Veach case, messy situation. Looks like Warlight Raff will have to step in there and do another analysis, diagnosis, and predictions. If you're interested in predictions, make sure to be on the lookout for that video. As for now, we'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Feel free to like and share the video to spread the awareness of this discussion, because there might be many other people out there that are completely left in the dark about Dylan's truck data. If there are any more follow-ups in the future, maybe we can look back and do a map analysis. But yeah, that's it for now. Goodbye and good night.